Hello, everybody. My name is Carr. I'm with Radiation and Health Unit at the WHO in Geneva. It is my great pleasure to start the webinar. And as a first thing, I would like to give the floor to the Director of the Department of Environment, Climate Change and Health at the headquarters of the World Health Organization, Dr. Maria Neira, to open the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Jonathan. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks for celebrating with us this wonderful day. This is a special day. You know, when you have a child, it's always a very special day. And today, after 2 years of very heavy, intense work, our child is the delivery of these guidelines that you will be celebrating and going through today. So again, let me welcome all of you to the launch of this new publication on developing national stockpiles for radiation emergencies. And you know very well that this webinar will provide you more insights, and I would like to start by thanking my colleagues, the team who has developed in the group, Janet and the team, and of course all the prestigious experts who worked without Saturdays or Sundays during a long time to develop this important document. As you well know, that the work of WHO is in many fronts, but one of the most critical ones is, of course, on the provision of health policy advice for member states. This is at the heart of our work, is at the core of our work, and is part of why the World Health Organization exists. And that includes, among others, the policies on environmental health and, of course, on health emergencies. We need to provide guidance and support to countries on how to strengthen their national capacities for the preparedness and response to emergencies of any origin. And now we have natural, technological disasters, but as well, we need to be as present when there are war conflicts or military conflicts. And as of May 22, there was an annual reporting to WHO on the state of the core national capacities under the international health regulations that you know very well. And then we realized that almost half of the WHO member states, they reported that they still lack the capacity to respond to the radiation emergencies. And you know that the radiation emergencies are now under the international health regulations. So when we realize that, the essential elements of the public health preparedness to those health emergencies will include the arrangements and the mechanism for assessing the risk, or to provide emergency health services, or to maintain functional health facilities, of course, ambulance, hospitals, laboratories, pharmacies, any type of supplies. And of course, you need a qualified workforce and sufficient quantities of the necessary medical supplies and devices. And therefore, the work that has been done to develop this report is contributing importantly to the international health regulations implementation, and it will contribute to the achievement of one of the most ambitious goals set in our organization global plan of work, which is to improve the health, or at least 3 billion people. We would love to improve the health of everyone, but this is the objective under our program of work. Of course, the situation we all went through recently proves that the health emergencies and humanitarian crisis, they need highlighted the need to have a timely access to medicines, to medical supplies. We need to provide efficient case management, of course. We need to have the supplies for diagnosis, for treatment, and this can be addressed if we have a good, appropriate alternative arrangements for accessing such supplies through arrangements and with manufacturers or neighboring countries. So with all of that, I think our new publication describes those protocols and those practices and ensure that the access to medical countermeasures for radiation emergencies are in place, particularly the pharmaceuticals that are required to treat radiation injuries, which is quite new for some countries, And it also addresses the governance and management mechanism, how we collaborate, how we discuss about stockpiles, and policymakers contribute and coordinate on the emergency response, healthcare providers, planners, and of course, medical specialists that needs to be involved on this preparedness and response to emergencies. This policy advice was produced through the collaboration of a global network of experts and partners. The goal of WHO, the best of our contribution to global health is to be in the possibility of calling the best experts around the world and using them to develop this type of policy. And therefore, we want to thank you all who have contributed, all of our gratitude for the support that you are providing to the mission of WHO, and of course, by doing so, strengthening the global health architecture. So enjoy this webinar. I'm sure that you will learn a lot. You have the best experts in front of you. And once again, welcome and thank you very much for joining us in this seminar. Over to you, Janet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Excellent words, wise words. I also want to join you in thanking our experts, whom I will be presenting in a moment. Without further delay, let me share my screen and start with the presentation for the webinar. Screen sharing. Putting it in full screen mode. Can you see it? Thank you. I would like to just say a few words of housekeeping to start with. All participants attending the webinar, you can send your questions to the speakers through the Q&A option within the Zoom architecture. You can see at the bottom Q&A button where you can type your questions. If you have something general to say hello to someone, do not use that option. Please use the chat option. All the panelists, I would like you to switch off your cameras when you're talking, if you are not talking, and I also will switch off my camera. And when I will be turning on my camera, that means you have 2 minutes remaining. That is how we will be keeping the timing. So, going ahead, this is our agenda of the webinar. I will introduce the speakers in a moment, and then we'll go through the document chapter by chapter, and then we'll have a short question and answer sessions and summary at the end. So first speaker is myself, Janet Carr. I am a medical officer at the Radiation and Health Unit of the Department of Environment, Climate Change and Health at the WHO in Geneva. I've been there since 2002. I'm a radiation oncologist by training, with further training in radiation biology and radiation epidemiology. I'm coordinating the Global Radiation Emergency Medical Preparedness and Response Network, and also a global laboratory network called BioDoseNet. I am a focal point in the organization for all matters pertaining to radiation emergency preparedness and response. The second speaker is Professor Nicholas Dainiak, who is a hematologist and a clinical professor of internal medicine at Yale School of Medicine in New Haven, Connecticut, USA. He is a former medical and technical director of REACTS in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. This is a worldwide well-known training center for radiation emergencies. He is one of the world's top experts in the field of radiopathology and radiation emergency medicine. Nick authored over 170 publications, edited 7 books, and has in his portfolio over 30 years of continuous research funded by the US government grants. He serves on various high-level national and international committees and has advised state ministries of health on radiation emergency preparedness programs, including those in the US, Singapore, India, Israel, and Brazil. He was a member of the initial US Strategic National Stockpile Working Group back in 2003-2004 and contributed to the first WHO consultancy on development of radiation emergency stockpiles in 2007. That was the core working group that developed today's publication. Our third speaker is Dr. Mark Benderitter, who is an expert in radiopathology and in medical preparedness and response to radiological nuclear emergencies. Today, Mark is Deputy Director of the Health Division in the Institute of Radioprotection and Nuclear Safety, IRSN, in Paris, which is a WHO collaborating center as well. He is in charge of the research and development activities of this division, including programs on developing of innovative medical countermeasures for radiation emergencies. And he is the head of WHO Collaborating Center and an active supporter of the REMPAN network activities. He also took part in numerous IAEA medical assistance missions, which were deployed in response to radiological accidents in Europe, Africa, and Latin America. Next speaker is Professor Matthias Port, who is the head of the Institute of Radiobiology of German Armed Forces, affiliated to the University of Ulm in Germany. He is certified in internal medicine, hematology, oncology, and palliative care, and trained in radiobiology. Colonel Port is one of the world's top experts in the field of radiopathology and radiation emergency medicine as well. He's actively involved in national and international committees and networks. He is a dedicated supporter of WHO REMPAN work, also of IAEA's RANET, and of the German Radiation Protection Commission. Matthias represents Germany at the Radionuclear Threats Countermeasures Working Group of the Global Health Security Initiative, GHSI, and at NATO. The next speaker is Dr. Chunsheng Li, who is a research scientist at the Radiation Protection Bureau of Health Canada, which is also one of the REMPAN members as a liaison institution. Chunsheng has been actively involved in a number of REMPAN projects, and we are very grateful for his support. And he is the chair of the Working Group of Internal Contamination Assessment and Management of the REMPAN. At Health Canada, his work mainly focuses on human monitoring and dose assessment. And in recent years, he has also done research on decorporation therapy methods. Chunsheng is a chair of the Canada's National Radiation Protection Association. He is also a member of Radionuclear Threats Countermeasures Working Group of GSAG, Global Health Security Initiative Advisory Group, which consists of health ministries, representatives of G7 countries plus Mexico, where he represents Canada. And he is a member of ICRP Task Group 120, which is developing a report on radiation protection for radiation emergencies and malicious events. Chunsheng was also a co-chair of the working group that developed today's publication. Next speaker is Dr. Andrea DiCarlo, or we call her Andy DiCarlo, who is a director of the Radiation and Nuclear Countermeasures Program at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases within the National Institutes of Health in the United States. Her background is radiology, cancer, radiation emergency medical countermeasures development, and she's been publishing extensively in government reports and peer-reviewed journals on biological effects of radiation, on medical countermeasures development and evaluation of biodosimetry devices and biomarkers for triage of overexposed persons. Representing NIAID, she has worked with many organizations to support global research activities and has served as a subject matter expert and presenter for multiple working groups and conferences. These are our speakers today. Then let me move further to put this presentation in the context of why WHO is doing this. Obviously, WHO, being a global health leader, is supporting member states to strengthen health sector preparedness to radiation emergencies. As Dr. Neira mentioned, this is done through provision of health policies, through technical advice and guidance, practical tools development, and support to countries' capacity building efforts through education, training, and strengthening their resources. WHO works in partnerships with other international organizations, health authorities of member states, NGOs, professional societies, academia, and of course, our collaborating centers network. We support countries in their efforts for implementing the international health regulations, and we conduct regular evaluations of their preparedness to all hazardous health emergencies, including radiation emergencies. And doing so, we use as our technical arm the Global Expert Network, REMPAN, which stands for Radiation Emergencies, Medical Preparedness and Assistance Network. We work with REMPAN experts on developing documents, for example, the one we are presenting today, and also in delivering assistance to members in need to help them to strengthen their national preparedness, or in case of emergencies, to deliver technical assistance to countries. So why we developed this document? The first report on national stockpiles for radiation emergencies was a summary of the WHO consultation held in 2007. Since then, new drugs came to market and were approved in several countries for use in case of radiation injuries management. New experiences were gained and emerged from managing and use of stockpiles in health emergencies. New guidelines were developed and published, WHO guidelines. And in May 2021, a REMPAN working group was set up to revise and to update the 2007 report, which was long overdue. We held 5 online meetings for this working group. We worked together, as Dr. Neira mentioned, we worked sometimes nights and weekends to get this done. And eventually, a year ago, we produced the first draft, which was then sent for the broad review and went through a number of reiterations, improvements. So eventually we finalized the work by the end of 2022, and then we had to go through various clearances and quality control procedures. And today the document is finally published. This is the working group of members who contributed to the report, and most of them are presenting today. In addition, we also had Professor Makoto Akashi from the Tokyo Healthcare University, Dr. Andrei Bushmanov from the Federal Medical Biophysical Center in Moscow. We had Cornelius Herman helping us with this work from the institute where Dr. Port is heading the Institute of Radiobiology, and Dr. Atsushi Kumagai from the National Institutes for Quantum Science and Technology in Japan. The rest of the speakers were already presented, and we will move on to their presentations shortly. I want just to introduce briefly the structure of the document. It has 6 chapters. Obviously, first we have an introduction where we present the scope of the document and the methods used to develop the document and the structure of it. In the second chapter, we briefly present health effects of radiation. We're basically doing a very, very short overview, considering that not everybody is an expert in radiation sciences. So we wanted a reader to understand basic things such as types of radiation, types of exposures, the routes of exposure, and the main health effects which can be caused by overexposure to radiation. Then we go further into explaining how to start when a country wants to set up a national stockpile, what factors to consider. Then we go into formulary of the stockpile and we look at elements of it, starting from internal contamination and then moving to the external exposure. Then we have a chapter on management and governance of stockpiles. We talk about different approaches, how countries manage it, and the roles of different stakeholders and organizations, and how to set up a concept of operations for managing stockpiles. And finally, we talk about today's research in the field of medical countermeasures for clinical management of radiation injuries. And we also conducted a survey of our network members of REMPAN. And of course, understandably, the matter of national stockpiles is considered a matter of national security. So not every country is ready easily to share this information, but those who did share, we presented the 8 countries' practices with the purpose of giving some illustration of how it is done in other countries. And of course, this is not part of the guideline or recommendation, but just a useful information for the users. And we have a link to download. I will show in a moment. This is the link. And the document is now available as of noon today, Geneva time. The document is online. So I already mentioned that The basic introduction chapter includes general information, and I want to mention the target audience for this publication is public health administrators, policymakers, healthcare providers, and any other health professionals responsible for radiation emergency preparedness and response. And the second chapter talks about basic facts about radiation and the health effects of radiation. The third chapter will be presented by Dainiak. Professor Dainiak, the floor is yours, please. You can turn on your camera and unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jana. There's a common proverb that failure to prepare is actually preparing to fail. It's been attributed to Ben Franklin, but we're not sure if he actually said it. Nevertheless, the proverb stands. Why develop an SNS? Well, it can provide scarce resources for a radiological incident and improve the standard of care, particularly applicable in mass casualties. It can help us move from a crisis care thinking and provision to contingency and ultimately conventional care. It can also permit resources when efficiently distributed to the users, typically in hospitals or at the site of the incident. And it can reduce morbidity and mortality among individuals who have combined injuries, that is, injuries from radiation and either heat or burns or mechanical injury. Next slide, please. The decision to create an SNS requires a good understanding of the types of sources of radioactive material and appreciating that for radiation used in a beneficial way, there's a potential for an accident. And that includes accidents in the area of medical therapy, such as diagnostic imaging, brachytherapy, radiation therapy for cancer patients, etc. And some of the common radionuclides are shown to the right. In the area of medical research and basic science research, accidents can also happen. And the types of radionuclides are shown again on the right. Energy production in nuclear power plants, as well as in hydroelectric energy, can also be a source for accidents, with the major radionuclides being U-235, I-131, cesium-137, and all of the secondary radionuclides from those elements. And then finally, industry. Industrial radiography is a common source for radiation accidents. To the lower right of the slide, you can see a source pigtail. These can be dislodged and picked up by unknowing individuals. So industrial radiography is important for assessing seams in pipes. So gas or oil pipe fitting is an area where this can happen. Metal welding, the aircraft injury industry. The radioisotope thermogenerators that are used in hydroelectric power, in food sterilization, and ceramics, with some of the common elements to the right. In addition, one has to understand threats from either terrorists or states. And finally, one needs to identify the scope and elements of an SNS, and we'll hear about that later. Next slide, please. Estimating the risk of an emergency scenario can be done by answering the following questions. Does a nuclear power plant operate within or near the state borders? Is radioactive waste processed or stored within or near the borders? Are radioactive sources used for medical therapy? Are radioisotopes being used in industry? And do terrorist groups operate either within or near state borders that could use a radiological dispersal device, which can cause both external and internal contamination and the widespread release of fragments and debris? There also could be the use of a radiological exposure device, RED, which is an unshielded radioactive source that could be placed in the workplace or in a vehicle or train, office building, shopping mall, etc. Or there could be an improvised nuclear device, IND, which is a crude weapon with a widely variable yield that has a wide scatter of fission products and the production of intense heat. Or there could be actually a deliberate attack on a nuclear facility. And then finally, are there regional states considering the use of nuclear weapons or attacking a nuclear facility nearby? Next slide, please. So estimates of mass casualties from a nuclear detonation were made in a US SNS working group. And its publication was by Wasilenko et al. I was fortunate enough to be the senior author of that paper in 2004. And if you look here at the number of patients that are involved for a 1 kiloton detonation or a 10 kiloton detonation, you'll see the numbers are large and surprising. The 10 kiloton detonation, for example, will yield at 15,000 to 24,000 combined injuries, over 13,000 immediate fatalities. The number of people requiring expectant care, which means making them comfortable, would be estimated at 45,000. Number of those requiring intensive care, nearly 80,000. Critical care, 100,000. And normal care, 70,000. With ambulatory monitoring in 139,000 and epidemiologic monitoring another 147,000. But the number I'd like you to really look at is the number of people who will require mental health or psychological support, over 270,000. Next slide, please. We've heard recently about the potential of tactical nuclear weapons being used. And looking at the relative size and yield of these weapons, on the left side, you can see for a tactical weapon, it's small, approximately 20 feet, compared to 120 feet for a strategic weapon. And in terms of the amount of radioactivity and yield, it's anywhere from less than 1 kiloton to 50 kilotons. And by comparison, Hiroshima detonation was 15 kilotons, and for Nagasaki was 12 kilotons. So even though some may estimate these as small nuclear weapons, these may be very significant. Next slide. So in sizing your SNS, you need to think of several ways, one of which is modeling, scenario-based modeling, where the radiation quality can be varied and where the demographics of the state can be identified, including its size of population, the age structure, its niche density, and its mobility. One should also consider the population geography. By that, we mean the population as a varying by space in distribution and composition in relationship to the terrain of the country. Importantly, the healthcare delivery system is important, which needs to include an emergency response, critical care, including emergency departments and ICUs and transplantation units, and the availability of subspecialists, including hematologists and oncologists, who are used to using cytokines that you'll be hearing about as part of the SNS, as well as infectious disease doctors, since infections are a common cause of mortality, as well as surgical expertise, intensivists, psychiatrists, health physicists, and an active public health program. It's important to identify pharmacies and their networks, how they communicate with healthcare providers located in the ambulatory setting, as well as in hospitals and other patient care units, and the psychiatry social work support system. And finally, the infrastructure of the state, including transportation systems, communications, internet availability, the structure of public buildings, the role of energy production, nuclear or hydroelectric power, and then transport of oil and water through pipes, etc. One needs to also anticipate the number of casualties based on these likely scenarios. And then in the distribution of injuries one would expect requiring emergent, urgent, or long-term therapy. Finally, the dosing schedule and treatment duration for specific radiation countermeasures. It's important to understand that for different scenarios, the principles of establishing an SNS will remain the same. And likewise, protocols for clinical care will remain the same. So at this point, I think I'd like to turn it back over to Jeanette. Jeanette?
Thank you, Nick. 10 minutes sharp. This is what I call high professionalism. Thank you so much. Bravo. As I mentioned, we will have a Q&A session at the end, so we will move on with our presentation further. So now we're going to move to the stockpile formulary, and this chapter is presented in two subsections. One is talking about internal contamination with radionuclides, and the first speaker is Mark Benderitter. Mark, the floor is yours, please.
Okay, thank you, Janet. So I propose you to go through this short list of blocking and decorporating drugs that were selected in this WHO document based on a robust science and medical-based information. So this short list of drugs is recommended by the WHO for implementation of national stockpiles for medical countermeasure against nuclear radiological threats. So let me first refresh you, if I may, with few basics about radiation. So radiation exposure may be internal, as you know, or external, depending and reflecting the physical condition of the radiation exposure. So external exposure may occur when part or total of the body is exposed to penetrating radiation rays from an external source. Radiation rays may be absorbed in the tissues or pass completely through. This is a completely different situation compared to the contamination situation that results from the release of radioactive materials in the environment of the victims in different form, gas, like aerosols, liquids, or solid. So the victim may be exposed to external contamination or to internal contamination. So external contamination results from a direct deposit of the radionuclide on the skin surface. And this is different from the internal contamination situation that result from radionuclides that are incorporated into the bodies via different routes, including by inhalation, ingestion, or after the loss of the skin barriers. So all these radioisotopes have a potential hazardous effect, and some of them have a specific tropism for specific tissues. For example, the well-known case of radioactive iodine that have a specific affinity to the thyroid glands. So international recommendation and criteria are proposed for the decision of external decontamination or for initiating a treatment with these drugs. So next slide, Zana, please. So several drugs are currently available for decorporating radionuclides, but not cover the totally or the complete spectra of existing radionuclides, of course. So that means that new drugs and formulations still in development to be more amenable to treatment of large population. So the list here of the proposed in this document, focus on the, let's say, the big five that includes the potassium iodine, Prussian blue, DTPA, alginate, and sodium hydrogen carbonate. So the decontamination of radionuclide aims at increasing the body excretion of the radionuclide, mainly by urine and feces, decreasing the distribution and the retention of the radionuclide in their target tissue or organs, and also decreasing the chemical or radiological toxicity. So next slide, please, Zana. So I will go through this big five, as I said. So the first one is a stable iodine, usually named as a potassium iodine tablets that are referred to as a drug for iodine thyroid blocking, and considered by the WHO as an appropriate strategy for reducing the risk of thyroid cancer in victims exposed to accidental release of radioactive iodine. So for these drugs, the optimal dosing is 130 milligram potassium iodine for adults and adolescents with adapted dosage for pediatric application, of course. So in terms of stockpiling, these tablets are packed in hermetic packaging and are stable at least for 5 years. Now, the second drug that is proposed in this document is the Prussian blue, the potassium ferric hexacyanoferrate, that is considered to be an efficient drug approved by several health authorities for cesium decorporation, and is considered by the WHO as an appropriate antidote in case of internal contamination of cesium. So Prussian blue is administered orally and act as an ion scavenger in the gut. So recommended dosing is 3 grams per day with adapted pediatric dosage of 1 gram per day. And the Prussian blue is approved for 5 years of shelf life under ambient condition of storage. So next slide, please, Zanat. Now, some words regarding the calcium and zinc DTPA that are considered as a chelating agent that are used for decorporating transuranium elements, including, for example, americium or plutonium, but is not recommended for uranium decorporation because of its nephrotoxicity. So the dosing for these drugs recommended by the WHO is 1 gram daily for 5 days, eventually continued by 2 or 3 injections per week for 6 additional weeks. So the route of delivery is typically intravenous infusion. So regarding the storage conditions, storage is recommended for 5 years in standard storage conditions, in terms notably of temperature. Now, the 2 last one, that is chelating agents. The first one that is the aluminum phosphate and the sodium alginate that are chelating agent recommended by the WHO for strontium decorporation. So these 2 drugs are efficient during a short time window and must be delivered orally shortly before the contamination and within the 2 hours after contamination. So dosing for aluminum phosphate is 100 milliliters and 10 grams for sodium alginate. So in terms of stockage, the suspension of aluminum phosphate is stable for 3 years, and the suspension of sodium alginate have a shelf life of 2 years. Now, the last drugs that is presented in this document, the sodium hydrogen carbonate is a drug indicated for uranium decontamination. So the WHO recommends a dosage of 1.5 millimole per kilogram per hour for intravenous injection and of 2 tablets 1 to 1.3 gram every 4 hours for oral delivery. So the treatment should be given under careful control because of the risk of hypokalemia and respiratory acidosis. So now, in terms of stockage for oral administration, sodium bicarbonate tablets have a shelf life of 3 years at room temperature. Thank you, Zanat.
Thank you, Mark. You also fit into this time schedule. Very, very well done. Thank you so much. We are moving to the next section of the report, which is focusing on the external exposure to ionizing radiation, or irradiation, we call it as well. And the next speaker is Dr. Matthias Port. Matthias, floor is yours.
Thank you, Janet, for the kind introduction. So next slide, please. So I will show you what we have within the documents for external exposure and especially management of the acute radiation syndrome. Exposure to high doses of ionizing radiation may result in this life-threatening condition of acute radiation syndrome, ARS. And if you want to understand what ARS means, you have to somehow divide this in sub-syndromes. And we know that high doses of ionizing radiation does damage to the hematopoietic, gastrointestinal, cardiovascular, neurological, and also other systems of humans. And we are far advanced in how to diagnose this kind of life-threatening diseases. And you see here an example of a differential blood culture of neutrophils, and you see if you have a mild exposure, let's say around 1 gray, you have a slight drop of neutrophils, and the higher you go with your external exposure, 1 to 2 gray, 2 to 5 gray, or above 5, 6 grays, then the drop of your neutrophils are even more, and within a few days, we are able either to triage and then to diagnose this hematological form of ARS. I will not be able to show you all the details what ARS is, but this graph is from a pocketbook from EBMT, and there's a link, and there you have a very short description. And if you want to learn more about ARS and management of ARS, I advise you to go, for instance, to this Spear publication dedicated from or authored from Professor Fliedner. There's a detailed description what ARS is. The question is, where can we treat people and what to do? And at the moment, we have some medication for hematopoietic and GI syndromes, but at higher doses where you have neurologic problems or cardiovascular problems, it's very, very difficult to mitigate it. And let's dive a little bit deeper into it. Next slide, please. So if you go to the first syndrome, which appears first, it's a hematopoietic injury. And there's good clinical evidence about the use of cytokines in ARS, but it's limited in regard to actual ARS. What does this mean? At the moment, we don't have any clinical studies in humans available regarding the treatment of the ARS. Yeah. ARS in humans is very, very limited at the moment. We had only big accidents and some small accidents where we have concrete knowledge about how ARS is developing and how to treat it. We included as medical countermeasures, especially the cytokines, into our Stockpiles. If we had consensus within the group, and the expertise was coming from, and the evidence was coming from, first, large animal studies. Especially the US have conducted a lot of animal studies in this regard, and this studies led finally also to the approval in the US for some of these countermeasures. We have additional expertise in this treatment of individual patients. Let's say, for instance, after Chernobyl or many accidents, the French colleagues have treated accidents from Peru and other countries, and they have good evidence that the cytokines work. And furthermore, we also have evidence that the cytokines work in similar diseases. They are not ARS, but some aspects are similar to what's going to happen in ARS. And you see here the main substances we are talking about. It's filgrastim, pegfilgrastim, it's sacromoscatim, GM-CSF, and it's romiplastim. And this is just an excerpt of a larger table you find within the document. And what I want to draw your attention to, we have for one country, USA, we have it approved as a medical countermeasure. It's not approved in this indication in any other country in the world. But for other conditions, most of this are approved in many countries. And so it's available for many countries to get these drugs, and they could be included in a stockpile. Next slide, please. Yeah, if you go deeper into hematopoietic injury, we talked about use of GCSF in different forms is a good possibility to enhance the proliferation of progenitor cells, to facilitate the myeloid maturation, and to protect against programmed cell death, for instance, apoptosis, and enhance the cell function. That's how this two substances work. And one substance mitigates thrombocytopenia, that's romiplastim. We have not included other mitigators, like mitigators against anemia, because there are not enough studies yet there to really make the final decision. At least the group thinks that, and they are not at no point in the world approved for this indication. Nevertheless, if you need them, they might work. A lot of people talk about hematopoietic stem cell transplantation, and what I very briefly want to say, that's an expert decision. Hematopoietic stem cell transplantation is something completely different than giving medicine. It's somehow invasive. It could be very dangerous to patients, but it could be life-saving. But it's only indicated if this cytokines fail and if there are other conditions. And you need expert knowledge to decide whether hematopoietic stem cell transplantation might be advantageous or not. Next slide, please. Yeah, here I show you again excerpts from the tables of our publication, and you see GCSF, which is one of these substances. You have to give it once daily as soon as possible after high dose irradiation, and within this prescription, there's a limit like over 2 grays. And what really in regard to GCSF and the pegylated form, this is down there, we have a lot of experience in hematological and cancer patients, including even healthy people. 10,000, maybe 100,000 of people in the world have got GCSF or GM-CSF because they served as bone marrow donors. So a lot of evidence about the safety. Pegylated GCSF, which is on the left down, you need only to give once per week, and so you only need 2 doses. But it's also a little bit more difficult if it's in. You can't take it out anymore. But it's very, very safe. On the right side, you see GM-CSF, which is also given once daily as soon as possible after suspected or confirmed radiation dose of above 2 gray or higher. There's one caveat with this medication. Also in other diagnoses, it's only available in very few countries. And romiplastim, you give also once after 2 gray, and it's that's a substance which can bring your thrombocytes up. Next slide. Yeah, for GI injury, we also have some medication. And GI injury, which is at higher doses, leads to translocation of enteric bacteria into the circulation, severe diarrhea, dehydration, or electrolyte imbalance. And for all this, you can use drugs available in hospitals. There's still no radiation-specific medical countermeasures. But as I said, you can give fluids, you can give antiemetic compounds, antidiarrheal drugs, and antimicrobial drugs. And we have here two we recommend. There's odanazostrones against as an antiemetic drug, and loperamide to somehow control the diarrhea. And I don't want to go in details how to give it. You have to go to the document. Next. Yeah, what is very important for me, this subsyndromes, it's a concept. At the end, it's a mixed disease. So ARS is not only one syndrome, it's going from hematological over gastrointestinal and cerebrovascular, and it's a multi-organ failure or distress syndrome. And up so far, there has nowhere in the world a successful treatment been with only one agent. So a single agent is not working at all. It needs a combined effort, and this includes hospitalization and implementation of many components of this stockpile. Yeah, and furthermore, not only what is mentioned in detail here, but you also need for successful treatment, you also need antibiotic, antifungal, and antiviral medications, and maybe even blood products to compensate. And I think that's my last slide.
Thank you so much, Matthias. You also did great with the timekeeping. So we are moving further through our document, and now we're coming to the section dealing with governance and management of stockpile. And next presenter is Dr. Chunsheng Li. Chunsheng, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Janet. In the coming next 5 slides, I'm going to talk about stockpile management, which is less technical. Developing and managing a national stockpile involves many considerations. We're going to cover national plans. We're going to cover stakeholders, concept operations, resource management, and different approaches. For national plans, we do have national emergency management plan, but remember that the stockpile should be part of this plan, an integral part. It's represent the overall national preparedness, capacity, and capability. As Professor Dainiak presented, we need to have a good understanding of the national risk profiles, the potentially affected populations, some assumptions, and any modeling result, taking all these into consideration and to decide the content and the size of the national stockpile. We do need to review the legal aspects. Some drugs approved for the intended indications. Some drugs may be approved for other indications, and some of them not approved at all. We need to have a good understanding of this. We need a protocol for decision making. Any national stockpile must be reasonably small. And in case of emergency, we need criteria to prioritize the use, how to allocate and how to distribute. We need these kind of protocols. We need to have a good communication strategies. What time and what priority for us to take the request and to address the request. And we need a more technical information toolkit on the use, for what extent or instant, or when what reading class involved, and what drugs we need to use, for example. We need all the technical thing of how to use. We need a message for specialists and public to make sure they have proper use of stockpile. Next slide, Janet. For stakeholders, we know for national stakeholders, national and local health authorities have the leading role in managing, in setting up and managing the stockpile, including approval, including the use and management, maintenance. For other emergency response agencies and healthcare facilities, they have a role to play as well, important roles, especially in deployment and implementation. For international organizations, WHO is the Minister of RHR, as Dr. Neira mentioned just now. And we have REMPAN, the platform for us to collaborate and assist. But WHO is not going to work by itself. It will collaborate with other international agencies. It's called International Agency Committee on Radiological Nuclear Emergencies. Among these organizations, IEA has leadership. It's defined by the Assistant Convention. Other nations, especially the neighbor countries, if we have agreement and arrangement with them, that will be very helpful during an emergency response. Oh, thank you. Concept of operations. This is very important part for any national stockpile development. We understand that any concept of operations should be developed among the key stakeholders. They address the strategy, the goals, conditions for the use, for management, and sometimes for international assistance. For example, if we plan to offer assistance to other countries during emergency, or request assistance from another country, it's very important part. Creating the stockpile that will need a good definition of the scope. And from there, we decide the structure and the size. For contract management, we need to have a plan for rotation of the supplies, because some of them will expire. And we need assistance during the emergency arrangement on this. For the facilities, we need to decide where to have this kind of stockpile, take all the safety and the security into consideration. Managing the stockpile can be challenging. The inventory management, for example, you need QA, QC system in place. You need continual monitoring and evaluation. Some new drugs might come into the market, may be proved, and the risk profile for a country might change during the time. You need to continue monitoring the situation and review and update the inventory as necessary. Emergency protocols. We need to handle the request for use. When they can request, who can request, how to request, for example. And we need a good approval process. And we need strategy on deployment and implementation. Managing stockpile need to consider staffing and training. We need to understand the qualification necessary for the staff managing the stockpile. We also need to train them from time to time, including training the field team. So next slide. Resource management. To establish a stockpile will require substantial initial cost. The purchase of the pharmaceuticals, supplies, equipment, but not only this, we need to have a proper facility we also need other costs, for example, the training, the development of the plans, and the associated cost. To maintain a stockpile, we need sustainable finance and human resources. After emergency use, we need to replenish the stockpile, that we need the money. And more often, stockpile rotation, it will occur regularly. It will require budget and people as well. The facility needs to be maintained for its proper functioning and expertise as well. We have to maintain the expertise of the staff. We need a reliable and sustainable source of supplies. We need to have a purchase agreement with the suppliers, and ideally, we need to have agreement there on the assistance during emergency. Very important, we need to have a contingency plan. Sometimes the supply may fail or production fault may occur, such as we observed during the COVID vaccine supplies. Next slide, the last one. There are a number of approaches to managing a national stockpile. The most obvious is the physical inventory we have. There can be a warehouse-based inventories, a national stockpile or operational stockpile. We can have a warehouse-based inventory. We can have user-managed inventory sometimes. The forward deployed, for example, they are deployed in the hospital, pharmacy, or even emergency vehicles. But very important concept is that we might have a vendor-managed inventories. The vendor-managed inventories have a number of advantages, including a regular rotation before expiration. And it might also address surge demand during emergency. There are two other approaches. One is virtual inventory, which is an agreed quantity of medical product set aside by the manufacturer or vendor for emergency allocation on request. We know that for vaccines, this is very, very often. Another one is called short-term loan. We just made this term. As we know, any national stockpile may be reasonably small, but during emergency, this small stockpile may be depleted very quickly. To address a very urgent need, if we have agreement in place with other countries, we can borrow this stockpile drugs or equipment from another country with agreement that we resupply them, we return them with the same quantity quality. This happened during COVID-19 vaccines, where US agreed to loan us 4 million doses vaccines to Canada and Mexico. This can be considered as well. So I think that is for me, Janat. Over to you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chungshen. We are doing well overall because some of our speakers went faster and some a bit slower, so we are okay with timing. The last section of the report is talking about scanning the horizon for new promising medical countermeasures research and development. And our last speaker, but not the least important, is Andy DiCarlo. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Janat, for the invitation, and thank you to the Global colleagues that I worked with on this working group. It was an honor to undergo this effort with you. Before I begin, I'd just like to make some caveats. The section that I'm going to be discussing is emerging technologies, investigational therapies, and some novel drug formulations. This will also include the potential to repurpose some products that are already available for other indications. But this is a very forward-looking part of the guidance and of my presentation. And so I want to be sure that the attendees for this webinar understand that these are not recommendations for the use of these investigational products, as they are not already licensed for a specific radiation indication. It's more to give you an idea of the pipeline, that a couple of different approaches that are being considered moving forward in research and development. And again, this is only a handful. There are literally hundreds of drugs that are being studied all across countries across the globe. So we've just selected a few that we think might be of interest to the member countries who are trying to develop their stockpiles. So again, none of the products that are going to be mentioned in the next 5 slides have regulatory approval in any country for specific use during a radiation mass casualty incident. However, you're going to see that some of them are actually products that could be repurposed and are approved for other indications. They are only under study, usually in preclinical development for potential radiological or nuclear use. And if they were to be used in the case of a radiological or nuclear incident, it would really just be based on off-label use and under physician direction. Next slide, please. So to start off, we've selected HOPO. HOPO is the abbreviation for the long chemical name you see there bulleted, and the chemical structure is off to the right. HOPO is an experimental oral drug, and what it's going to be, what it's under study for is use as a decorporating agent. That's removal of internal contamination, as was mentioned earlier in the presentations. The great thing about HOPO is that it's an oral capsule. Currently, the decorporation agents that are approved for certain removal of radionuclides are actually intravenous. The IV requirement is a problem for use during a mass casualty incident. So the development of drugs that can be taken orally is a significant advancement. And these particular HOPO compounds, of which only 1 or 2 are shown here, have been shown to be effective, and they look to be promising and safe means of decorporating actinides. Currently, they are in rodent studies. In those findings, they've shown that it's actually more potent than some of the existing approved products, specifically calcium DTPA, which was mentioned earlier in this presentation. And even when they're given at 5 days post-contamination, they've been shown to effectively decorporate plutonium and americium. And actually, some of these products are starting safety studies in humans. Next slide, please. So in addition to the acute radiation syndrome that was discussed during this presentation and in the guidance document, there are also delayed effects from an acute exposure, which can include damage to the lung. One of the compounds that's under consideration for radiation-induced late lung injuries is something called lucinactant. So this particular product is a synthetic surfactant that is used in the trachea, deposited to the trachea for use. And actually, it was approved in 2012 for treatment of neonates who had acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. Further studies showed that in rodents, the drug did preserve lung function when given post-irradiation and led to an overall improvement of the animals. So this was considered significant. And because of its approval in premature infants, it's generally considered to be safe in pediatric and adult populations. The caveat is that because it has an intratracheal use, it should really only be administered by respiratory specialists or clinicians who have intubation and ventilator management experience. Next slide, please. The next class of drugs that we wanted to bring up for consideration are angiotensin converting enzyme, or ACE inhibitors. These ACE inhibitors have actually been studied for both acute radiation syndrome and also the late effects of radiation exposure, including lung and kidney. There's a number of different types of approved products in this class of ACE inhibitors, lisinopril, captopril, enalapril and lisinopril are some examples. And as you can see in the photograph over to the left, it is an oral dosing. These are 10 milligram oral tablets. The drug product is actually licensed already for use in high blood pressure, for heart failure and some other clinical conditions, and has been for quite some time. And so this means that there's a lot of data available across all the different age groups, pediatric, adult, the elderly, that show that it is generally safe. It has an excellent safety profile. So when this particular compound has been used in rodent studies, it does show increased survival from the late lung complications, even when it's dosed weeks after irradiation, which is significant because we know in the case of a mass casualty incident, it's going to be important to be able to come in later once you've established whether individuals have injuries or not. In addition to its safety profile, it's of low cost and it's widely available. And some data in clinical trials have shown that it is able to reduce kidney and lung injuries in patients who have been irradiated. Next slide, please. So this particular erythropoietin stimulating agent, or EPO, was discussed earlier in this presentation under a hematopoietic treatment of the acute radiation syndrome. It's generally being looked at to manage the anemia that results from radiation exposure. In the graphic to the right, you can see that the body has, as its own mechanisms to maintain homeostasis, the ability for the kidney to produce erythropoietin in reaction to an anemic state or a low red blood cell count within the body. That EPO then enters into the blood and can stimulate the bone marrow to cause increased production of red blood cells. But it's also possible for external therapy of erythropoietin to be given and lead to the same outcome. So actually in 1989, erythropoietin was, as an external therapy, was approved for this red blood cell loss that's associated with the inability of the kidney to make the compound itself. And this includes in chronic renal failure and other health conditions. And although it's, again, not approved for use during a radiological incident, it has been used off-label in radiation accident patients. So there is some evidence that it has been used in small-scale radiological or nuclear incidents. And it's believed that the way that it promotes recovery of red blood cells and survival is through this mechanism shown in the graphic. And in fact, rodent studies have shown a survival benefit from animals who have been irradiated and then provided the erythropoietin therapy, about 24 hours after that radiation event. The next slide, please. So earlier in this presentation and elsewhere in the document, there is some suggestion that certain cellular therapies may be effective. Hematopoietic stem cell transplant has been mentioned as a possibility for the treatment of the hematopoietic complications of acute radiation syndrome. Also in the document, we mention the potential use of what are called mesenchymal stromal cells, or MSCs. So if you look in the graphic on the bottom, these mesenchymal stromal cells can be collected through a bone marrow aspirate in humans. Those cells can then be grown outside in a cell culture, and then they can be administered back to the patient through an autologous graft. And the great thing about those studies that have already been done using these cells is that they combine a classical surgery, a debridement skin graft approach with the local administration of these MSCs actually into the area of the injury. And there has been successful use of these cells in a limited number of patients. And the graphic shown to the right is an individual who was received a cutaneous radiation burn during a radiological accident in Chile in 2005. And in addition to the complete healing that's seen in the image, there was also ability of the MSCs to relieve the intractable pain that's often associated with cutaneous radiation injuries. And it had happened very quickly. This pain seems to be resistant to very potent pain medications. So that's a significant outcome. The caveat is that with any cellular therapy, and specifically ones for cutaneous injury, they do require someone with expertise in plastic surgery, and of course, access to these cell therapy units. And the work referenced here is one of our fellow colleagues on this working group, Dr. Mark Benderitter. So again, to restate, these particular countermeasures are just a sampling of the hundreds of drugs that are currently being studied in programs across the US and across the world. And this is really just to give you an idea of what might be possible in the future, the kinds of therapies that may eventually reach the point where they can achieve approval and licensure and be stockpiled for use. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. I think this concludes our presentation session. And now I will stop sharing the screen so I will be able to see the questions. And I will invite all the experts to turn on your cameras. And we will look at the questions. So I see that my colleagues have been already answering some of the questions. So let me start. The first question, I will be picking some of them, and that requires a quick thinking. Question number one will be to Nick Dainiak. How does a national stockpile program work with the healthcare system to deliver its radiation countermeasures? Nick, would you like to take that one?
Yes, I'm happy to, Jana. Thank you for the question. As I had mentioned, it's important for the SNS to make inroads into the distribution of the products after they've been stored. This requires that the SNS staff make sure that potential users know what is in the stockpile. They need to know how to access the stockpile, as Chunshan had mentioned, and they also need to know what's the anticipated delivery date, and finally, what can be done in the interim in terms of management before that stockpile arrives locally. One of the best ways to do this is to exercise regularly. That is, have the SNS staff involved in organizing exercises or scenarios in a live situation in hospitals or clinics or wherever care will be distributed. And during these exercises, these questions will come up. Well, who do we call to get the cytokines or get the latest agents of DTPA, for example? Who do we call, and how long is it going to take to get here? In the meantime, how can our pharmacies be helpful? Perhaps our pharmacies can provide cytokines to the supply at a limited supply for the next several days, during which time a larger cytokine deposit will be made from the stockpile. So those are good ways in which this SNS staff can reach out and can help in the distribution of the products to where they need to go.
Thank you, Nick. So the next question on the list we have, is WHO stockpiling any pharmaceuticals to support member states in case of a nuclear emergency? This question is to myself, and I'm happy to answer that. At the moment, WHO stockpiles for health emergencies consist of generic pharmaceuticals and devices, sort of PPE devices for both for any types of emergencies. And we have a small stock of potassium iodine tablets, which could be made available in case of need. And first of all, they will be provided to the WHO staff working in the field in the countries. But in terms of other pharmaceuticals, which we are now including in the document and we are presenting here, so far WHO does not have its own stock of these specific medications. We are discussing with our partners, with countries, whether we can have a mechanism for access to cytokines, which would be in case of a very low probability catastrophic event of a nuclear detonation, cytokines will be extremely useful to have in case of people receiving high doses and developing hematological syndrome of the acute radiation syndrome. And these drugs are very expensive and have a short shelf life. So it will not be practical to buy and keep for years this medication, which will expire very fast. So we need to find a mechanism how we can have, so to speak, virtual stockpile to have those supplier bubbles to know where these stockpiles are at any given time, how we can quickly access them. And as you know from the COVID pandemic experience, WHO is in the best position to come up with this type of mechanisms. For example, as COVAX mechanism was introduced in response to pandemic. So I'm going for the next question, which is to Dr. Mark Benderitter. And the question is, what are the strategies and practices for KI distribution to the population? And also the question related to KI, another person is asking, what is the procedure for extending the shelf life of KI? Mark, would you like to answer this one?
Yes, so thank you for these two questions. So the first one regarding the strategy for KI distribution to the population. So I think the way to think is the following. So as you know, the time window to use KIs is very short. So KI should be delivered in the few hours before contamination to radioactive iodine, and very rapidly in the first hour after the contamination. So this is the time window to use it. So depending on the location relative to the radiological source, different strategies are possible, including pre-distribution of the KI tablets. Because of this short time of decision and making the people absorbing these KI tablets. For example, in my country, in France, we have a strategy to pre-distribute the KI tablets in a distance that is 20 kilometers from the NPP. Okay, so people are ready when they receive the order from the government to take these KI tablets. So again, depending on the distance of the population regarding the initial event, then after you can have an additive strategy is to have stockpiles of KIs that are pre-distributed in reference centers that makes these tablets available in terms of access to the population. So this is for the first question, and the second one was on the extending the shelf time. That's it of KI. So the recommendation in the document of the WHO is a shelf time of 5 years. Again, I will take the example of my country. In my country, we have a shelf time that was extended to 10 years. And we bring to our health authority the demonstration of the stability of the KI tablets, depending on the providers. But we have all this quality control, stability control that we perform, and we ask to the authority, to the medical authority, like the equivalent of the FDA in France, based on this technical data, to extend from 5 to 10 years. So it is possible. It's a specific procedure you have to deal with.
Thank you, Mark. Next question is as following. The cytokines are approved as medical countermeasures primarily based on large animal studies. Is this the case? Is this enough to propose inclusion into stockpile? I think, Matthias, you would like to answer this one probably.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. Yes, I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, this animal rule which we have in the US is not valid in all countries of the world, of course, and not anyone else has applied it. But it's a good chance to get medication approved in a condition where we will never have clinical studies. I mean, if you have to use them, then it will be something like after a nuclear bomb or other big event. And then there you can't do studies, and we don't have clinical setups to use them. There is no regular ARS syndrome. That's one thing. So I think that's enough, or that's one component. And the other component is that we can draw conclusions from other patients, other patient groups, let's say leukemia patients, or even patients who have other hematological diseases, to make this, to use this knowledge to say, okay, it's enough data that we might use it in emergency situation. All these countermeasures we have here are only for emergency situations which are not regular. We think yes, but of course you can question that. And I really want to thank the US for doing all the studies. I mean, that's a huge effort here, really.
Janet, you're
Janet,
muted.
You're muted. You're muted, Janet.
I'm sorry, my apologies. Next question is also to Matthias, and it is in the Q&A. The question is following: what mechanisms exist now or potentially will exist in future to determine how to prescribe MCMs in the stockpile? Following a disaster, not all potentially exposed people will actually need treatment. Matthias, do you understand the question?
Yeah, I understand it. And it's not only that they don't need the treatment, we only will probably in a very large event not have enough medication for everybody. Yeah, so so depending on the stockpile and on the diagnosis, we really have to make a good triage. So we need possibilities to distinguish who are the patients in need of this special medication. And we have good techniques in biodosimetry, clinical dosimetry, or even conventional dosimetry, or if we think people might close to an event, then they might have high radiation. So we can use all this data. And there are some experts, even on the visitors here, who very know well how to triage people and how to pick the right ones. And of course, this also has to be covered, but that's not a topic of a stockpile creation. Yeah, that's just a lot of work to do. You find other documents. I hope that answers a little bit the question.
Thank you, Matthias. Next question is to Chunsheng. And the question is, what is the main advantage of vendor-managed inventory of stockpiles? Would you like to answer that, Chunsheng?
Sure, Janet, I'll try. The key thing for stockpile is that we need to rotate regularly, because the product will expire over a period of time, and it costs money and it costs a lot of effort as well. The advantage for vendor managed inventory is that the vendor will put aside the inventory, and it will rotate the inventory regularly before expiration date. There's no waste as well, so that will save money and save the drug. Most important. Yep.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers the question for the person who asked it. Now we have a question from Balaji from Reacts, who is asking how long the animals were followed after the treatment with the experimental drugs. Was the treatment done once or multiple times? And Andy, I think you
Yes.
answer that.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Balaji. So I think that what we would love to have is a treatment that is a one-time only that can be given, 24 hours or later after radiation exposure. And in some instances, for example, as Mark mentioned, N-plate is a ramiplostim is a single dose, whereas Neupogen is dosed daily until you get to a certain neutrophil count. Neulasta is dosed once a week as needed. So that would be several doses. In terms of the investigative drugs, some are given one time, some are given daily. For some of the late lung impact doses, they're actually given continuously. So they're given every day through the entire course of the study. In the preclinical models, those studies could be for acute radiation syndrome, 30 to 60 days, and for some of the late effects, 180 out to 210 days. So the US has a unique resource, which is a radiation survivor colony, where animals that have been used for some of these studies go and live out their days, and they're a really important source of natural history. And there are animals who've been treated with mitigators that have gone to have their time in these colonies, and so we're able actually to look months and years out to see if there's any late complications from those early drug administrations. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Andy. I'm noticing that we passed 3 o'clock, which was for how long we planned the webinar, but I think if it's okay with you, we take a few more minutes. There are 2 more interesting questions, and then we will close. The additional question is also to Andy, and the question is about the mechanism of radiomitigation of ACE inhibitors. Would you just say in a couple of sentences
Sure.
the main catch there?
Yeah, so although these renin-angiotensin system suppressors are known to be involved in lowering the blood pressure, the ACE inhibitor mechanism of action is not actually believed to be directly related to their ability to lower blood pressure, but there's some uncertainty as to what the actual process is, but some evidence suggests that they can decrease the immune response to radiation exposure and in doing so, reduce the inflammation, which can lead to especially late effects like pneumonitis and fibrosis in different organs like the lung and also in the kidney. So this was a really important work that was done by the late John Mulder with the Medical College of Wisconsin and his colleagues. And I think that that's how they believe that it's implementing its effect in the preclinical models.
Thank you. Due to the short of time, we'll just take one more question, and it will be to Nick again. And the question is that for decorporation therapy, can we use uranium excretion enhancing drugs such as chelating agents to induce the excretion with as much uranium as possible in the early period? Nick, you're muted.
Yeah, for uranium, it is possible to use other mechanisms to enhance excretion, but it's primarily solubilization of the uranium that's critical. So you would like to solubilize by altering the pH of the blood, which is the primary mechanism of action for sodium bicarbonate. So that is the primary way to treat uranium. There was mentioned, I believe that Mark had mentioned, that you have to be careful with using decorporating agents because of their effect on the kidney and actually can impair or interfere with the net result, which is to have eliminate toxicity.
Thank you, Nick. Well, I think for the shortage of time, we will then continue to the closing of the event. I would like to introduce, and I want first of all to thank everybody who asked very interesting questions. We will try to answer those which are still unanswered. We have few left by email. And I would like to introduce my colleague, the head of the Radiation and Health Unit at the WHO, Dr. Emily van Deventer, who will summarize the webinar. Emily, are you there?
Yes, well, I think you have just heard the webinar, so I don't think I will summarize it. But I would like to thank you as participants, as experts, policymakers, public health and emergency specialists. And on behalf of WHO, I really would like to thank you for participating in this webinar and to share with us the launch of this document. Actually, this policy advice has really no utility unless first it is read and then further disseminated to relevant stakeholders and decision makers. So we count on you to help with the dissemination of this policy advice. Second, it will have no utility unless it is implemented where needed and especially prior to when it would be needed. So when it comes to implementation, at WHO, we need to report based on specific indicators. So we would very much welcome national experiences based on this document. Of course, we hope this advice will be useful for developing a stockpile, while hoping we do not actually need to use it. Finally, I would like to thank the experts who have provided their knowledge, their enthusiasm, and today that described the work that has been done, and very much want to acknowledge the coordination of my colleague, Dr. Janat Carr, and also the input of our previous colleague, Dr. Maria Perez, now retired. So at this point, I would like to thank you all for participating today, and would like to close this webinar. Thank you very much.